Hey guys, Ben here and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the DCEU and talking about potential crossovers. So if you do go on to enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos later this year. So as you've probably seen on the channel recently, we've been covering a lot of DCU content, whether that's to do with the Superman film or the Supergirl film. Obviously it's been a lot of Supergirl news over the last week or so, but we are starting to do more DCU content because obviously my main focus was the arrowverse before, but that is gone. So hopefully you guys start coming back and you watch all my DCU videos, and obviously if you can watch any of them, even if you aren't like super interested in the topic, that would mean the world to me if you're my long-time subscribers. So yeah, shout out to you guys that continue to watch, and welcome to all of you new guys, and sorry for rambling. Let's go ahead and get into today's main topic. So talking about the DCU, let's talk about potential crossovers. So crossovers is a big thing in comic book history, I guess you could say. Like TV wise, obviously we've had the Arrowverse, that's kind of your biggest example. Then after that comes like the MCU. Obviously they did some big things with Spider-Man, and you know, introducing the multiverse was a big thing for them, just like the Arrowverse did. And so with all of that happening in the past, and with the big crossover events in the comic between Marvel and DC and all these other properties that were able to actually cross over and create these like really interesting events for fans of different properties, obviously fans are expecting, yeah, at some point in the DCU, not necessarily straight away, like you're not going to expect huge crossovers early doors. Obviously Superman has a lot of characters, but I wouldn't technically class it as a crossover straight away because you're introducing those characters for the first time. Like yeah, it's going to be cool seeing Supergirl and Superman, but it's not going to be a crossover because it will be acting more like an introduction. So I guess you could say, yeah, a cameo could count, but I don't know, I wouldn't count that in my books. But talking about who could cross over and what universes, what kind of properties in the future of the DCU could cross over, I've got a list of 5 that we're going to go over. Now, not all of these are like absolutely gonna happen. Like I'm just gonna say, take it with a huge grain of salt. This is just me theorizing, having fun, as all comic book fans like to do. Like you like to think about what if, like that's literally a Marvel TV show. So my first pick would be the DCEU, right? I'm talking more about like the connections, what storylines, what characters are going to appear that we're going to be familiar with already. Now, obviously with James Gunn taking over, he's taking over most of his characters that he worked on in the DCU. And obviously the 2 projects he worked on was the Suicide Squad, which he directed, and Peacemaker, which he directed as well. So he's bringing across characters like Peacemaker and Amanda Waller. Those are 2 of the biggest characters that he is bringing over, and there's still questions about like all the other people, but you can presume a lot of the people that appeared in the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker are going to be crossing over at one point. Obviously you got some anomalies with the kind of continuity, I guess it's not been fully explained to us yet, but you know, you've got Guy Gardner in Superman, right, played by Nathan Fillion. He was in the Suicide Squad. You would think Amanda Waller would recognize his face, but no, that's going to be looked over, of course, because that is recasting, right, for this new DC universe. So he's gonna have to do a lot of explanations. But talking about characters that could also potentially cross over or join the DCU from the DCEU is potentially Blue Beetle. Now, I don't think James Gunn ever ruled this out, but I do feel like if they ever want to do Blue Beetle, they really got a perfect casting already done, because Blue Beetle was a great film and I really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of you did, but it came out at a tough period for Hollywood, a tough period for cinema, because it was during the strikes, and you know, none of them could actually promote it because the actors strike, and so it was literally just the director by himself. Plus also you just had The Flash before, which absolutely flopped at the box office, which was a big shame for DC fans and for the DCEU as a whole, because obviously there was a lot of expectations going into the Flash film that it was going to kind of be this huge film because everyone loves The Flash from the TV show, but it really turned out to be a disappointment to a lot of people, and you can see that in the box office numbers. But in the case of Blue Beetle, obviously it didn't perform well, but people loved Blue Beetle. So I think that could definitely be a possibility for the DCEU. So let me know, what do you think down in the comments below. Let's move on to the second option, right? And this is something that the Arrowverse did in the past, and that is by bringing DC actors back but using them in different roles. And as I already established at the start of the video, James Gunn has already started to do that, even though it's with an actor that works with him on literally every film, so he doesn't really care for continuity in that case, but it sets a precedent for that potentially happening. And so by honoring past DC actors, by bringing them into the loop, and by having them show up, playing different characters, even having cameos, that is something that obviously the DCEU did a little bit, and then the Arrowverse did big time, right? Like, they had so many actors come back playing different roles. For example, Erica Durant showed up in Supergirl as Kara's mum for many seasons. You also had Terry Hatcher show up in Supergirl. Obviously, she was a huge hit back in the day when she played Lois Lane on Lois and Clark. Other good examples from The Flash is like John Wesley Shipp, who played the original Flash in the 90s TV show. Also in that show was Mark Hamill, who played the Trickster, and he returned as a different version of the Trickster in The Flash. And a very good example that most people will know is Brandon Routh, because he returned, but not as Superman originally. He played the Atom, and then eventually he showed up as Superman in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So they really went out there to get legacy actors back from DC's past, and I think that's something that later down the line, again, I'm not saying this is happening straight away, I'm not saying any of this is happening, because again, we're just theorizing, but I could see that happening, and James is a big fan of DC in general, so I think he will go back. And talking of that, I think the Arrowverse does stand a good opportunity of potentially crossing over at some point, whether that be through honoring past actors, because obviously they have big fan bases. I'm talking specifically about Grant Gustin just because of, I think, the popularity. It really has been really telling how big a fan base Grant Gustin truly has, because every time Ezra showed up as the Flash, even before the Flash film and especially after the Flash film, he was always compared to Grant, because Grant was such a popular Flash, right? And so I feel like that's just the natural Arrowverse crossover if they were to ever do that. Again, that could be further down the line. We know that there's talk of a Flash film, and we know that potentially Wally West could be the first Flash to show up in the DCEU. But I believe down the line you will see Barry Allen, and Barry Allen will probably have his own film, and I think there is actually a decent chance that Grant Gustin could be considered for the role. Now obviously he could play a different version of the Flash, so maybe technically it wouldn't be counted as a direct crossover to the DCU, but if they are just using him and his popularity, I would call that a crossover. Now, let's talk about the fourth option. Now, this is something that's been talked about quite a bit recently, and that is the connections potentially to Matt Reeves's The Batman universe. Obviously, The Penguin just came out recently, so there's still lots of talk. The Batman Part 2 is supposed to be coming sometime soon, but that got delayed by another year. So with all of that going around, there was still talk of, okay, is this ever going to be connected to the DCU? We haven't had like proper clarification. But we know, I think James Gunn has inferred that he is open to the possibility of that happening. But as far as we know, the Batman universe is set in an Elseworlds universe, kind of similar to the Joker, right? And I think it's a good thing that they have Elseworlds as a separate thing, because that doesn't mean that DC Studios has to make solely DCU content. They can make other films, TV shows, animated shows, or animated films that are quite different and don't necessarily fit into the continuity that they're currently creating. And because I think with what the MCU has done, which obviously has been very successful in the past, but now I would say it's quite limiting having to involve everything and think about the future all the time. Like, by having those separate properties and not connecting them like the Batman or like Joker, I think that is a really good thing for the DC universe, and I really hope they don't actually cross over Robert Pattinson's Batman with like David Corenswet's Superman or anyone else in the DCU, because I think having Elseworlds is very, very important for the future of DC Studios, because they can't just be like, okay, the DCU has to succeed, and if not, this is all going to explode, because that's what the DCU did. They exploded because it just didn't work out in the end, but luckily for them, they had great properties that were doing good. Obviously the Batman, you have the Penguin recently, Joker did great first time around. I like Joker too. Obviously that split the fan base, like people didn't completely love it and it didn't do as well at the box office obviously, but it was still something quite different, and I think there is value in that. But nevertheless, there is always the possibility that Warner Brothers and James Gunn go over to Matt Reeves and are like, please Matt, like we need you, come over, join the universe, let's be at least a little bit involved. But obviously Matt Reeves has his own ideas for the future of his Batman universe, I guess you could call it. And I really don't think he is thinking about the DCU right now. He's not going to be thinking about what James Gunn is making next. He's not going to be thinking about Supergirl. He's not going to be thinking about Superman or anything like that. He's going to be thinking solely about the Batman Part 2 and then whatever comes next for Pattinson's universe. So let's talk about one final fun possibility, and I did mention it earlier that in the comics there have been crossovers at multiple times between Marvel and DC. Now, obviously this would be like the ultimate comic book fan's dream. What do you guys think? And let me know down in the comments below, because I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Do you ever think there is any possibility of the MCU and DCU crossing over at some point? Like, imagine they get to the point where they're like running out of ideas, they're like, ah crap, what do we do? Or they come together because James Gunn is obviously that link between the MCU and the DCU, having done Guardians of the Galaxy and now being in charge of the DCU. Like, could he be like, okay, Kevin Feige, like listen up, let's do this thing, let's break the box office, let's break everything, let's break the whole universe. I would like to think that James Gunn would do something so radical later down the line. Obviously that would be like 10 years time or something like that. It could even be longer than that, but I think you've got to try it at some point. Like, I think that would be such a big hit. Obviously it would be a really big risky move. I think it would be less of a risky move for the MCU, just because right now it's not doing as well, and I think it would be a bigger risk for the DCU because they're trying to build something and they want to be different from the MCU, so that would be obviously your big kind of question mark. But whether you like Marvel or DC, I think comic book fans as a whole would just lose their minds and lose their shit whenever they saw this actually happen, if it ever does happen. But that pretty much does it for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you want more theory videos talking about potential possibilities of the DCU or any other universe, please be sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment. It would really help this video get out there. Also subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. For now, you can click on the top right corner of the screen to watch my latest video, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.